Okay, hello everyone. I'm Rafael Donero, and today I have here Podge. So Podge was my manager in the previous company I was working for, and he has around 23 years in the software development industry. So he's a tech veteran. He has worked in very large multinationals company as well as startups. The day job, he's engineering manager, and at night he likes to code, build things. So he just don't want to lose touch with tech. So Podge, you're very welcome here.
Thanks,
And
Rafa.
thanks a
Good to
lot.
see your face. Good to see your face.
Thanks a lot for accepting the invitation for the interview. And I'm sure that every software engineer from the Java Challengers audience will get a lot of value from this interview. So you're very welcome, Podge.
Thank you, Rafa. It's great to see you again. And great to be here.
Awesome. So I have a couple of questions to Podge, and those questions will be focused on the career perspective and how it can help you to grow in your career. And I'm going to also make some questions to Podge about his career and how you can get inspired to use those concepts in your career as well. So, Podge, how was the beginning of your career? Were you a developer? Did you like to be a developer? You probably yeah.
I like to think I'm still a developer, sadly, but I'm doing management a long time, so I probably could write code, but you wouldn't want to put it into production, probably that kind of way. But yeah, 23 years, man, or 22 years, 23 years, I can never remember. Been a long time. Lots changed in the industry since I started. Like when I started on like Visual Basic and ASP, classic ASP, like not ASP.NET. That's only a brand new language. That's only 15 years old. I was doing classic ASP, very scripty type language, and like SQL Server 6.5. It was like, oh my, like this stuff doesn't exist anymore. And I was just thinking, like, I knew some of these questions because you were kind of giving me prep in our pre-call, and I remembered, like, what was it like to be a developer? It's just like, it was much easier than the stuff we have to do today. Like, there was no Jenkins, there was no testing, there was no like your deploy 20 years ago was FTPing files to a server. That's how you deployed, and it was there, and it just worked, and you were done. So it's changed a lot since I did it, for sure. I remember, like, even started, like, I did .NET for 10 years, and SQL Server, and I remember, like, the only way to get Visual Studio was like you had to order it on CD. That's how old I am, Rafa. Like, I'm trying to hide the gray. I need to shave the beard, but yeah, definitely doing this a while, for sure.
Yeah, things got a lot more complex. I totally agree with you. But at the same time, like, we have a lot more capabilities nowadays to scale our system, which is something that wasn't possible back in
Oh
the
yeah,
past.
like
So,
even if you think of AWS, you're dead right. Even if you think of it like AWS, like I used to have to buy servers and then be like told I'd like a server. Dell would go, that'll be there in 12 weeks. Like, great, I'll sit around and read the newspaper for 12 weeks. Newspapers, lol. But yeah, I'll read the newspaper for 12 weeks while I wait for my server. Now Amazon, click of a button and EC2 spins up, and you have a server there on demand. So some things are definitely for the better, for sure.
yes.
Some things maybe not so much, but too many abstractions for my liking. I'm maybe a bit old school, but yeah, on the whole.
Awesome. And Podge, why did you decide to become a manager? Did it just happen to you, or it was something deliberate? You decided in your career, okay, I want to be a manager. So how did that happen in your career?
Nobody wants to be a manager. I don't think no one comes out of college who writes code goes, I really want to be a manager. It was definitely an accident for me. I used to work for, and I still to this day is probably one of my favorite companies. I won't mention names, but they provided music software for companies. So Apple as a service, Apple, or iTunes as a service, or Spotify as a service. That's what they did. And they sold it to other companies like Samsung and stuff like that. And I was on a team that was basically making, I suppose, what Spotify would do every year now at the end of the year. They tell you, hey, this is what you listened to in the last 12 months. This is your favorite music, So I was working on a team that basically was building a similar feature. And that was like 10 years ago now. And it just grew in size. So like I was just like kind of like the solution architect on the team when they had things like solution architects. And like it just grew as a team, and everyone just kind of went, well, I'm the most vocal, as you well know. I talk a lot. I have a big deep voice. I command a room, kind of a thing. So they're like, you must be the manager, and I kind of just fell into it in that way. So like, just like my manager Paul just came over to me one day. I said, so could you be the manager? I was like, yeah, sure. What's that mean involved? And he goes, don't worry about it. Nothing really of a change. It was a big change. But yeah, so I literally did just fall into it by accident to become a manager.
By the way, I worked with Paul and he's very nice.
Good, good.
Yeah, nice. That's so like it kind of happens then, like because like you are very vocal and you have also like strong presence. Like when you talk, people listen to you. So
that might not be a good thing, Rafa. That might not be a good thing. But yes, they do.
Okay, so yeah, and like this is one of the most important traits for a manager, right? Like to be basically a leader.
Yeah, I mean, I had a really strong director in that job, and he was a really good coach. You need to be a really good coach when you're a director. And I know we're talking about this as well in prep, but that's one of the key things. And ironically, yes, I chat a lot, but to be a good coach, you have to listen more than you talk. And I was just very lucky in that first job to get a coach that would listen and then kind of teach me the basics of management as well. So like you do need the basics of like how to talk to humans, how to give feedback, how to say something without offending, which I don't always succeed at because it does require you to think before you speak, which sometimes I don't do so well. But yeah, I was really lucky in that first job, like to get someone that would give you that kind of coaching. So yeah. So it's not all natural. It's a lot of work as well. You have to learn a certain set of skills. It's actually similar to individual contributor. As you as an engineer, you still, as the more senior you go, you have to develop very similar skills because you know yourself as you go up, you have to talk to more people.
Exactly.
So good times.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because many developers, when they start as developers, they think that they won't have to interact with people, but actually software development it's a very social kind of work because you have to know what your team is doing. You have to communicate clearly or what exactly we're doing to your team. And sometimes there are some problems that are complicated to solve. There are a lot of skills that we have to work on as software engineers as well. It's not only coding, it's not only technical.
For sure, big time.
Yeah. So, Podge, what do you like the most when being a manager?
I like engineering. And one of the things I'd love, and it always kind of gives you joy in your life, is when engineers build really good engineered, well-engineered products. So like you have to build a product that people want and you have to get it to market. The more you go up the food chain, the more up the ladder, that's what you realize, it's a lot of it's about impact that you can have. But for me, it's getting impact in the right way. So like working with engineers and they don't just, hack a solution together and get it to a customer. They go, no, we're going to test it. We're going to build do a continuous integration pipeline. So like do GitOps, it's going to be high quality, not just like code coverage and like unit test and integration test, but like all the other type of testing and you can do. So engineers who really realize that that's what engineering is about. It's like you do the monitoring and you're in charge of quality as well as writing the feature. Building teams like that, that's kind of, it's really nice when you're in a meeting and you just have to sit back and listen and you don't have to get involved because the team is just getting on with it and they know what they're doing. So working with those kind of teams, that is probably my favorite thing. Dislikes would probably be the next question if I was a betting man. That list might be a lot longer. We might not have enough time in this hour. The downside of being a manager is that it very much depends on who you land into, like who's your manager.
Yes.
When I first became a manager, I had an amazing manager above me, like I said, who gave me great amount of coaching and gave me this, instilled this like I was influenced by reading this. He gave me books, he gave me to read. I read a lot of like Deming, lean manufacturing, Toyota, all these kind of engineering books, like how to build cars, like not really software books, but engineering books. And like they had a huge influence then on my philosophy and like what I thought would be the best way to run a team. Like I'm very heavily influenced by Toyota. Like they get a lot of things wrong as well, but they get a lot of things right. And it's the ones they get right is the ones that latch onto. So, that's like a positive, but like why am I saying the positive in the dislike section of this conversation is because it doesn't happen very often. Like following managers I had in later companies were horrendous managers. Some of these managers, Rafa, they were horrendous. We won't talk about that though, but they go in and just exert pressure, and it's the kind of pressure that crushes you as a human, and that's a terrible way to treat anybody, kind of thing. I'm really lucky in my current job. My manager's amazing. Like I have a lot of time for them. They, again, going back to like my first manager, kind of they take a lot of time to listen. They know how to talk to people and how to influence people. They're not in a rush a lot of the time to get there. Like a lot of qualities. Whereas if you do the opposite way with the other managers I've had in the last couple of years, it's just like, can you have, it's the old joke of, can you make if you have 9 women, can you make a baby in a month? That is their logic as a manager. And like, it doesn't work like that. But they don't want to see that logic. They just want to get to an outcome. So yeah, so definitely the lack of training other managers get. Like, just know, like if you're coming in to talk to me, we do a coding test and I look for certain things and I tell you what I'm looking for. With managers, it's a lot more abstract, and it's also a lot more beatable in the interview process. Now, I'm talking about generically, not any company I work for or currently working for, but generically, they'll ask you, like, tell me about a time when you've done X or Y and Z. And they're always the same question. So it's easy to get an answer off the back of that. So it's not really a great intro system. There's no way of really checking if someone's a good manager. Like for me, it would be like, can I talk to 3 people that reported into you, would be what I would ask. And if they say, no, you can't, it's like, why don't you want me to talk to people that work for you? You'll find very quickly if they're a good manager then, So yeah, that lack of consistency in training of managers through companies means it's a pure luck if you get a good one or a bad one in a company.
Yeah, that's very important.
You obviously had an amazing manager in the previous company, right, Rafa?
Yes, I did, yeah. Yeah, I think it's very important to have a manager who trusts in what you're doing, because then you can really show your potential. Otherwise, like if there is a lot of pressure constantly, I think developers tend to get very stressed out and they don't show their full potential.
100%.
Okay, so next question. This is a bit difficult. It's a bit tricky question, but have you ever fired someone, and how did you handle that? Because such a difficult and delicate situation. If you did,
so short answer, when you're a manager for 10 years, more than one occasion. If you've ever had to do a reduction in force as well, you have to do it a lot, because if you're removing like 20% of the workforce or 30% of the workforce, you do have to sit down and talk it through with people. That's a special case. The firing you're probably talking about, and the better term I was taught years ago is you never fire someone. It's regrettable. That's the kind of the term you use, where it's just like, this person's regrettable. Okay. So they never actually use the word firing, because firing denotes that sometimes like you're not doing, you're not good at what you do, whereas a lot of the time you're just not a good fit for the company.
Makes sense.
Again, I've done a bit of it. I've been in the room watching other people do it, and I'll talk about that. They're kind of like interesting stories. None in the last couple of years, touch wood, I haven't had to do it. A couple of years ago, before any current job I have right now, I had to do it a lot. Interesting time. Startups are very up and down, but like if it's for performance reasons, normally it's not a surprise. I mean, like there's a lot given to somebody if you do it right. If when you sit someone down to have a very tough conversation, where and you sit down, we'll do the conversation bit in a minute, they won't be surprised. They shouldn't have a lump under their throat. They should be like, I know what's coming, because you've had 10 conversations before that, and it could be 10 or 20 or 30. I think there is an old saying in like startups in the West Coast of the United States, which is, hire slow, fire fast. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of somewhere not on board with that. Definitely hire slow, and like make sure you do your due diligence and someone's a good fit for you technically and culturally. But if they're not, it's not really on the candidate's fault. Then the person who comes into the company, it's not their fault that you didn't do enough good due diligence. So this is just me personally. So like I think it's like, what did I do wrong for that candidate if they came into the company? Like, how did I fail them in the interview process that we didn't catch it? So I owe it to them to make sure we do, it might be something small. Usually I would start off with a meeting, like I go through like a manager expectation kind of a thing, where I'd sit you down and go, just so you know, I work off a traffic light system, for example. This is a way of doing it. So if you're green in my traffic light system, it means you are working well and you're meeting all expectations. There is nothing to address. If you're amber or orange, depending on your country, it's, you've done one or two things that they're forgivable, but you're not performing, and you have a lot of time. Like it's not nothing major, but like if we don't rectify it over 6 months, like it'll move into red. And then red is the last one, which is you're doing a lot wrong, and this is what you're doing wrong, and you lay it out, and then you have this amount of time to fix it, and the timeline is defined, like 4 weeks to fix this particular behavior or this particular thing. And if you can't fix that, there'll be a hard conversation at the end of that. So like you're giving them, like you're not telling them they're going to be let go or they're going to be made regrettable, but it's going to be a tough conversation that's coming. And even then, I've got into those meetings going, you're in red, we've told you you've been in red, and then that person you're like at the cliff, and you can either jump off or you can take a step back, and we try and figure it out again. So you try to give people as much, in my opinion, unless there is exceptions to that rule. If people assault people, if people do anything inappropriate in law, anything, there's a couple of those kind of hard use cases, which is like, no, there's no process is going to save you. You have to leave HR or stepping in at this stage. If there's no HR, it's you have to do it. But 9 times out of 10, it's a process, and you sit down, and it's and then at the end of that process, it's like we have measures, very poor measure, because I'm talking to engineers in this thing. It's like you have to do 20 commits a day, and if you hit the 20 commits, you're going to be fine, right? That's the kind of, like, it's a clear cut measure. I mean, I would not use 20 commits. That's a horrible way of measuring any engineer. But at the same time, it's just, for this example, it's just like it's a clearly defined measure. You hit it. Well, I taught you to hit something, you've hit it, so you're in the green. Like, there's nothing I can do. Just be consistent from now on with it, and that's how you'd approach it. But if not, you do have to sit them down and have a hard conversation. If you have to have a hard conversation, the conversation is short. Do not. So I tend to joke and laugh. That's my kind of way. That this is the only time you would ever see me being super serious, because it's a serious situation. So you sit down, simple language. We've had talks in the past. It's still not working out. You're still not meeting our expectations, and unfortunately, we're going to let you go. That's as quick as it happens. Do not annotate it. Do not change it. Do that and say, point to HR in the room. They'll be contacting you with exit and how to, last paychecks and all that. Thank you very much. And you just leave it at that. Leave the room and let them sit there. If they go bad, have a security guard on post as well if they need to be removed from the building. But that's, again, just managing risk. But yeah, like, I've been in a room with some people in previous companies many years ago. I always have to say many years ago, because I'm cognizant I work for a company that is amazing right now, and I never want to mix the two. So this happened years ago, but like being in a room with a person who observing them letting somebody go, and this person was Irish, and they took it in an upset way, which is really sad. You don't want to upset people, but it is upsetting. And they're like, you're just letting me go without anything. And he goes, well, we'll give you a sack of potatoes. And they're Irish, like a real racist thing to say to an Irish person, because they weren't Irish. Yeah, real nut stuff. And that person was like, thanks for saying that. I was like, why? Go take it to my lawyer that you said that's massively racist. And they're like, oh, I was just joking. It's like, nope. And that's why you never joke. You keep it serious and do it, and often leave. But I'm not the foremost expert in this. HR are a much better place, because they have to see it across all departments. I thankfully, in the last couple of years, it's been a very rare event with me.
That's amazing, because I think it is one of the worst things you can ever make as a manager. Not good.
It is, because you're taking away someone's career and someone's life, their paycheck away from them, and they might have family, and those are things that go through your head. If not, I would worry for that person who doesn't think like that. And then you're the other person on the other end going like, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail? Like, it's terrible, and it's in your head that you failed then as well. So like you're doing damage on the other person as well, in my opinion, and maybe not rightly so, but it's just that, again, they're not a fit for a certain particular company,
Exactly. And like in the side of the employee can always learn a lot. There are always like some lessons to be learned during this process, and think it's a good time for the employee to reflect and, okay, like where did I make those mistakes? How can I get better? I know it's a very difficult moment, like for both, like for the manager and for the employee, but the employee can also, okay, like this situation is bad, but what is the bright side? What lessons do I learn from that? Because then you can use those lessons for the next company. Okay.
That was a hard one, Rafa. That was a good question. I like that question. Give me more of those questions, please.
Thank you. Podge, being a director in your previous role, and I would like to know what is the difference between a director of engineering and an engineering manager. So what's the difference between those roles exactly?
Good one, because I actually was having this conversation, not this like, kind of direct conversation, what's a manager, what's a director. My current manager has a really good way of looking at it, which is, when you're a director, you look after multiple teams, and you look after engineering managers as opposed to engineers, and you tend to, which one needs the most help at any given time. So when you're an engineering manager, it's just your team, maybe two teams if it gets big enough, a senior engineering manager, 3 or 4 teams, but it tends to be a lot more narrow focus. So you look after one team and one team's goals and issues and problems, whereas a director looks after 5 or 6 different teams, potentially goals and problems, and they all vary in intensity then. So like I have this manager who's like, which is the most intense one for you? And like that team, so worry about that team the most now. So like you tend to focus on one team for a while and just make sure they, whatever problem they have, whether they need, admin rights on something so they can get a project done, whatever the problem is that you help them and you focus on them and you focus on that one thing. But you're not really paying attention to 3 or 4 other teams behind you because they're fine. And then that one gets to be in a good state and you'll find there's another team over there then that needs your attention and you go talk to that team. So it tends to be, you move from team to team, and if they're all doing fine, it's really good. That's rare, but it does happen. When you look after so many engineers, it's a good time to sit down and reflect, and obviously, how to improve things. And that's usually where I spend the rest of my time then, which is improving. Like, I tend to look a lot like management from through the lens of like Deming or something like that, where you spend a lot of time looking at cycle times of engineering teams. When a customer asks for a feature, how long did it take before it was put into their hands as a customer, and how to optimize for that cycle time. So I'd like recommend stuff like reading, up on like theory of constraints. So you look for like a bottleneck and take advantage of that bottleneck as much as you can, and pour out your heart and soul into making sure you use it at 100% capacity. Once you've got to 100% capacity and it's still not working, do something to remove that bottleneck altogether. So very much like theory constraint stuff. And that's what I spend the rest of my time doing, trying to optimize that system within the rules of the bigger system I live in. I do a lot of like systems thinking stuff as well, kind of trying to figure out how the bigger system works. I'll stop there because I could talk about this for like hours.
Yeah, interesting point. So as I understand, then a director would be taking care of around 5 teams, and a director would focus more on the team that needs attention or that there is a bottleneck. And as I understand as well, a director would also work very closely to the product.
A lot of companies will have a user experience team, design team as well, and they usually go hand in hand with product. So it would be them. You'd be figuring out bigger direction, bigger problems, bigger boulders. A lot of companies now don't have a product and a design on each individual team as well, because you want to make those teams. That's how I would always kind of run teams. When given an option, is you want to isolate the teams from a dependency perspective. Like, I don't want to have a feature team who's dependent on another feature team over here for something, because then it's just one big team in reality, and that's harder. So I tend to focus on working with product and design, and how do we eliminate the dependency between those two teams a lot. So they both can work independently of each other. So yeah, correct. I would agree.
Okay, perfect. That's very important. Like to keep the teams working in a kind of like not impacting each other. And as a director working with 5 teams, would you have contact with the managers of those 5 teams, or you would be interacting directly with the whole team?
A bit of both for me. It depends on any given day and any given team and any given problem. It's definitely a thing of being a director as well. Going back to the original question, is like, what's it like being a director? Like you manage managers when you're a director.
Managers.
And managers, when you're a manager, you learn about the system and how it works. And when you're a director, you know that the managers know how the system works. So it's kind of a different way of managing because they know how the system works, and they know how it works. So like you can always, like, they're not going to come at you with an easy problem if they can help it, because they already know how to solve most of the problems on their own if you've coached them well enough. So like it's much harder problems you tend to get from managers, or they tend to be much more personal problems as well, like conflict within the teams. Thankfully it doesn't happen to me very often as well, but that goes down to hiring strategy. But yeah, so like it's a much different thing. Whereas if you're an engineer manager, like you're looking after engineers a lot more and talking with them and more, and they usually just want to build product and write code and build systems and do engineering. So it's like, for me, it's a slightly easier muscle to do than the managing a manager one, for sure.
Great. The follow-up question for you then is, how is exactly the day-to-day work of a manager?
Individual fires. It's like the director looks at many fires, an engineer manager focuses a lot more. So they're focused, like, again, most teams will have a UX person, a designer on the team, and a product manager or product owner on the team. So they tend to have a lot more of a narrow focus, and they look after more narrow problems. I don't like saying smaller because it sounds like it's trivial. They're never trivial, but more narrow problems where, like, you have a particular thing you need, a particular feature you need to build, and they focus a lot more on the day-to-day then of, if you do a check-in every day, for 20 minutes, say how's the whatever, if it's Scrum or Kanban or whatever agile process you want to use, they're doing basically those day-to-day ceremonies and making sure the team is getting through what they are planning to get through. So it's a lot different, again, to be a manager in that regard. You're a lot more near the cold face. And this, again, is my opinion. Different companies will have a different definition for a manager and directors. Like even like directors that I gave you, there's other companies that would have different definitions of a director. A director might only look after 6 engineers, and he's a technical director and he writes code every day. But depends on the ladder per company. But coming back to engineering managers, yeah, a lot more closer to the action, a lot more closer to the code. Does a lot of PRs, does a lot of code reviews, make sure quality is up to speed, testing is being done well, whatever that is for your company.
Interesting. So there is a segment on the management role where you can be more technical.
Again, very much dependent on the company. I mean, there's an age-old question: should managers be technical? I mean, there's like charity majors, these internet famous people will talk about, should managers be technical? And they talk about the pendulum of manager to engineer. So you should be an engineer for a couple of years and then go into management, spend a year or two there, and then come back into engineering again, swing back into it. So I would kind of fall on that spectrum a lot of, you should write code. You should, like, I follow Toyota and the Toyota production system a lot. They have, and any Japanese watchers, I'm sorry, I'm going to get this wrong, but like there's a term, I think it's Genbutsu. I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it means go and see. So like there's a skepticism if the manager hasn't gone and seen the problem and is able to look at the problem themselves in code and figure out with the team what's gone wrong in an outage or something like that, then senior management in Toyota would be very skeptical that that's actually what's happening because you haven't gone and seen for yourself, kind of thing. So I think engineering managers, personally, myself, should be like that. Every company is different. That's the key thing, though. You need to adapt to whatever the company values. Some companies don't want managers touching any code or going on what they call like critical path. So I could commit to writing a piece of code, but because I have other management duties that take precedence, it won't be written for 5 weeks. So you're blocking engineers from doing their work. So critical path work. So yeah, so there's a logic to not wanting managers to write code, and that I would also see. But I would always, in the engineer in me would go, I want to write code every time.
Exactly. Okay, awesome. And now tell me, how is the day-to-day work of a director?
Fires, it's putting out fires. For me as well, like, again, a lot of this is personal. Different companies. If you go to somewhere like I think it's levels.fyi, the website, I hope it's okay to call it out, like they'll give you lots of examples of different ladders and different companies on what it means to be a director, what it means to be a senior engineer. You can look at the ladders and all of them are completely different. So all of this stuff is very subjective. But one of the key things for me is as a director always is removing dependencies. I want to see teams moving executing independently. I want them to collaborate always. I want them to talk to each other, but not when it comes to execution. They should never be that intimate at all. It should be very separate. Team A should be able to write and build and deploy code and has absolutely no bearing on Team B's code or features. So for me, a lot of the time, that's quite a hard problem in a lot of companies, removing dependencies, because a lot of the time you end up managing dependencies, which is a lot of work and a lot of bandwidth for any human being, because you need to keep an entire software system in your head. And when you have to keep a software system in your head, it can be very difficult to reason about it. So, you can kind of go, Rafa's going to make a change to feature A, that's going to affect feature C, F, and G. And then you need to talk to those teams that look after those features and go, right, we're going to make a breaking change. Way too much work. You never catch it all because, well, not never, but you're living off luck, which I don't like to do. I tend to rely on math and data.
That's awesome. Follow-up question about director role. I know that for each company, it will be different, but what is the most common hierarchy? I know that there is developers, managers, director, but who would be your boss or your manager as a director? Most companies.
Senior director.
Senior director.
Common. VPs is another one, vice presidents. I mean, again, it's crazy. And when you look at ladders, when you work in banking in America, the ladder would go like specialist, senior specialist, vice president, then it's assistant director, director, and then it's senior vice president, something like that. And you think if vice president's only second from the bottom or third from the bottom, that doesn't seem very high. And you're right, it's not. And that's in like banking. That was like 10 years ago. It may have changed, but like most of the banking companies I knew in the city were working like that. And then you come into startups, West Coast, pure software companies, and VP is like the highest you can go in the ladder. So, there's like the labels are really not consistent. Again, it's like management, there's no official training for it. There's also no consistency in the labeling of it. But it tends to be mostly in Silicon Valley, West Coast type of things, where it would be, manager, senior engineering manager, director, senior director, VP, SVP. And it usually stops around SVP. You start running into like the C titles then, like CTO, CPO, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. What is a CPO?
Chief Product Officer.
Okay. So
they're all some of them are kind of new as well. Like it's constantly evolving and change. They're all made up. Most titles are made up. And like you don't hear me talk about individual contributors there either. So like engineer, senior engineer, principal, staff, senior principal. They're a different ladder. They're usually separate ladders because management and engineering are two separate careers. Like that they're widely different. So they have two different ladders going for them as well.
Yes. So like for engineers who want like a more technical career progression, they should go to the principal ladder.
Yeah. In the individual contributor, they would call it.
Individual contributors.
Yeah.
Why there's this word exactly?
Because you're on your own. You're an individual. So your impact is mainly centered around the code you write and the systems you design and build. So you're measured pretty much on your own, whereas a manager would be measured on how good they are at moving people and getting people to do things.
Yeah, but at the same time, Podge, like developers, like principal engineer, like they are very high position in the company.
Oh yeah,
like, those engineers, like they can impact the whole team by mentoring them, like by making very important decisions about architecture. I don't know.
Sometimes like classically, you're right, and sometimes classically the manager would have been paid more than the engineers. Those days are kind of changing as well. The engineers are at, if not parity, they're even getting paid even more than management now.
Yes.
Depending on the companies you look at,
Yes. So, Podge, I also know that you worked for small startup, medium-sized companies, and even multinational, huge companies. Which one do you prefer to work the most, and why?
For me, I wouldn't look at companies that are big or small or medium. Size is not the thing that I look at. Like if there's like 100 engineers or 1,000 engineers or 10,000 engineers, that's not where my focus would be. My focus would be on like, how do they do engineering? Like if you look at AWS, some of the ways to do engineering are very good, very cutting edge, built for like optimizing for engineers to be productive. Massive company, like thousands of engineers, but like you are made, every engineer I know that comes out of AWS is a good engineer. No, I haven't met all of them, but all the ones I have met are really good engineers. So that's a massive company. And it's the same with smaller companies with like 20 engineers. Again, they value engineering and they optimize for productivity and they automate as much as they can. So if you do that, I like you. If you're small, big, or large, I don't really care. So it wouldn't be about the size of the company or the number of staff they have. It's like the principles of engineering that they follow. Because I am in it for the engineering. I want customers to use the products we make, Perfect. But I do that by building engineering, in a software, not by doing the product side of it. I leave that to the product manager or the designer for designing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. How do you hire the best talents? Because I know that nowadays it's so difficult to find highly skilled software engineer. What is your strategy to hire the best talents in the market?
Is the question, if I have someone sitting in front of me in an interview, how do I measure them in the interview to see that they get hired?
Maybe the whole process, like how would you sell the position? Like what do you think it's important to have in the company to retain the best talents? How would you interview them as well? How would you keep those software engineers motivated and
we don't have enough time for that answer. I can give you highlights. Like, how do you sell a company? Like, there's always something good in every company you can find to sell, to show to an engineer. Is the culture good? And when I say culture, like personal, like do people get along? Are they nice people? I have that in spades currently. Everyone I work with is very collaborative, and it's very easy to have conversations and have disagreements and then come to a resolution. I find so that's a real good selling point in a lot of companies. Other things you could sell is we're solving a problem, and that our teams are kind of. And this is me personally. This may not necessarily be anyone I've ever worked for in recent times, but the teams are like modeled nearly off Amazon Web Services kind of model. It's all done through an interface. You mostly done through an interface. You're isolated execution wise. You have admin rights to do whatever you want in your AWS account. Deploy whenever you want. You support all what you deploy, and you test what you deploy as well. So we give you a great amount of freedom to solve the problem. That's I find that if you go I tend to rely on three different things, and this is not me. This is me stealing it from someone called Daniel Pink, which is purpose, mastery, and autonomy. That's always what I reach for when I'm trying to sell a job to anybody. So in those two cases, they gave it there, are either purpose, mastery, or autonomy. So the Amazon one, there's like autonomy. You have a great amount of autonomy. In other companies I've worked in, it's just like the purpose. We're here to solve a really hard problem and do a really good mission. Like I think one of the missions on the team I worked for years ago was like an artificial intelligence company that was using artificial intelligence to catch hackers when they break into your network. Like it was the best thing. So we use artificial intelligence. We store a huge amount of data, and we're here to catch bad guys doing bad things. Do you want to help us do that? And like everyone's like, who doesn't want to catch bad guys? So it's a really easy thing to sell someone on that kind of a mission and that kind of purpose. And then the one in the middle is mastery. So we're going to make you the best engineer you can possibly be. So I tend to look at like space metrics a lot. Nicole Ferguson, if you ever read any of her work, like she goes, there's a huge amount of evidence to suggest that high performing teams, from when you merge to main to when it goes into a production, is less than 10 minutes if you can do that and you do testing. Because you can always get it in less than 10 minutes, but like, is it highly tested? Is there a lot of safety in that change? Can you roll it back? Is there a lot of instrumentation and observability involved? Like there's a huge amount of effort that goes into main to getting it into production. So that I would be selling that to some other people then, because that's what they'd be looking for, is like, I'm going to make you the best engineer. It's going to be very hard, because to do 10 minutes from main to production deploy is incredibly difficult with the constraints we put on top of you. But you're going to be an amazing engineer when you come out of the back of this. Again, AWS, they instill that a lot in their engineers, how to I've never met an AWS engineer who doesn't know how to build something at scale, and it's like a muscle memory for them. They're amazing every time. Roberto, a person we know, Roberto Cambuzzi, fits that bill to a T.
Amazing. Yeah. So I know it's a very big topic, but to summarize, it's purpose, autonomy.
And mastery.
and
I give you the link to the book. I don't get a cut when he makes a sale or anything, but I will send you a link to the book.
Definitely, I would be very motivated with all of those points, like knowing that, okay, what I'm building has a purpose, knowing that, okay, I have autonomy to improve the product the way I want, and mastery. Mastery is so important for every software developer.
Big time.
If the software engineer feels he or she is not evolving, they will be demotivated.
You have no idea. Like it's for me, it's like the main reasons people tend to churn out of companies. They're missing all of those things. One will keep them interested, but if you have none of them, it's really hard. You know, yeah, I'm that's one of the reasons I try to be very do a lot of coaching, because trying to steer people to one of those three things as well as part of the coaching. You know, highlighting like this is like an autonomy thing you could help work on. You know.
Amazing. Okay, so let's go now more in the career path, and let's talk more about software engineer's career. So, Podge, what advice would you give to a software engineer who is willing to become a senior software engineer? For you, what are the most important traits that the developer should work on? And also, what is necessary to become a senior software engineer in your point of view?
So I'm going to start doing plugs here, if that's okay, for the website. So Roberto on my team, he's written a blog post about what it takes to be a principal engineer. So I'll give you the link to that after this call.
Awesome, I can put in the video.
Sweet, definitely do that. So he obviously he has been a principal engineer for quite some time, and he wrote a blog post about it. Obviously, you know, like you're an individual contributor. Going back to that, that was one of his big key takeaways. Generally, you know a lot of technologies, not just one. Like you don't sit like Roberto. Python would be like he's a T profile. Python is his best language, I think. Hopefully, he doesn't beat me up for if I get that wrong. Not that he would. But he also knows Rust. You know, he's doing Java in his current job. He does JavaScript. He writes some React stuff. I've seen him do it. No, he doesn't have any. He's like very agnostic. He's just this great thirst for learning new things, and that's why he knows so many different languages. He does a stream as well on Monday nights on Rust with Luciano, another friend of ours, awesome. And Eugene, another friend of ours. So they do a stream every Monday afternoon or Monday evening GMT. On like they do the advent of code on Rust, and that's it. Like we don't do Rust in our current day-to-day job; it's all Java. But he just learns it, so that's another key thing. They're also pushing for new technologies in their job as well. So they're an advocate for, you know, we have a particular problem. Cool, nothing we have currently solves it. So this new technology could solve it for us. That's another thing for him. Going back to what you said is like they have a lot of sway over engineers, so like influencing engineers. And it's not only the engineers in their immediate team, it's other engineers in other teams as well, which you alluded to earlier in this conversation. And the big one, of course, for Roberto is they don't manage people. That's why they're an individual contributor. They don't manage people at all. So like, I'll give you the link to his blog post. He does a way better. I think my favorite quote out of his entire blog post was, and I told him this the other day as well, was they go where other engineers are scared to go. Like that is that is a senior principal engineer for me, or all the way, is there's a part of the code base that hasn't been touched in like 10 years. And yet they were like, it's okay, I got this. I'm going to jump in and fix it no matter what's the problem, you know?
That's a very interesting point. Go where the other software engineers are scared to go.
There's always some part of the code base somebody doesn't want to look at.
Yeah, or even like bigger problems. Sometimes there are some deployment problems, or you need to create a whole new cloud environment, which is very complex task. You need to know what you're doing to build a whole new platform. I would say then, by your explanation, a senior software engineer should be also influencing people.
Definitely, it's written in that blog post as well. He mentions it, I'm very sure. Like again, I have a terrible memory. I write everything down. I'll send you on the link. You can share it.
That's great. Okay, I'm gonna put the article in the description of the link, and then if you want to go deeper in the topic, you can read this article. Okay, so follow-up questions then, Podge. Well, you deal like with professionals all around the world. So what would you recommend for a developer to study or get prepared for interviews in Europe, considering that this developer is a foreigner? What is the most important things that this developer should get prepared regarding technologies or soft skills? Like, what would you value in a software engineer?
There's three things. So you cannot get away from the fact that you have to do a code test in nearly every job interview from now till the end of time. I don't know how we got there, by the way. My first job I went for, I used to smoke, which I'm ashamed to say. I've getting healthier these days. But it was over a cigarette with my future boss. We had a conversation for 20 minutes, a coffee and a cigarette, and he gave me a job. And that was one of my first programming jobs. Now it's like much different. You have to write code multiple times, or you have to review code, or you have to design systems. I tend to still focus on writing the code one if I have to choose one. And I would say, why is the code? Because everyone thinks it's about writing code when it's not. That's only about 30% of what you're trying to achieve in a coding interview. The other two things you want to do, and this is for the people who will be going for an interview, is one is how well you communicate what you see as the problem. So that's another 30%. And the last 30-odd% is listening to the person who's interviewing you. Too often people don't listen in an interview and they just try and get through it as fast as they can because it's a very nerve-wracking thing to do. And they're freaking out because, oh my God, I have to perform at the click of a finger and look at a problem and in 10 seconds know what the problem's about and then just write code and solve it. And that's how I'm going to get the job. Whereas sometimes they want you to actually talk about the problem and like take a breath, talk about the problem. And then they might have a disagreement on how you see the problem. They'll tell you the disagreement and then you respond to that disagreement in a coherent manner. So if you do that well, you'll do well in the interview. And you may not necessarily write the code to pass the thing, but you've written enough that they go, well, they were on the right path and they communicated very well, they'll pass the interview. That's how I work. So like, it's not necessarily about solving the problem. That's like table stakes. That's like I expect you to solve the problem. It's like, how well do you verbalize the problem and talk about the problem and communicate the problem that you see in front of you? And if we tell you you're wrong, or if we can see an optimization in your solution, that you listen to that and you try and go for that solution as well. Or disagree with it and have a good reason to disagree with it that the interviewer works with. But again, interviewing is incredibly bespoke. Like the ladders are very bespoke. I wouldn't, I'd say it's very much down to luck when you do interviews. How do you turn up in the day? What time in the day you're even doing an interview? Like if you're doing it like late afternoon when the interviewer is really tired, I might have done 5 of these interviews already today, your probability of failing is much higher. Well, they're tired. They're just tired. Like they did the same in a study on judges on how likely they were finding you to be guilty or not guilty. And I think like if you came in after lunch, you're more likely to be found guilty because they've had food and they're a bit tired and they're cranky and like, so it increases the chances. It's not 1 or 0, but it's definitely increasing the chances. So it's similar to interviewing. So there's so many things that could go for you or go against you that it's kind of hard. But if I had to go communication and listening skills as well as just getting to write the problem, they're the top 3. There's a million other things we could talk about, but they're the easy. It's like the purpose, mastery, autonomy answer I gave earlier. They'd be like the pillars I would go for.
Yeah, so you value a lot how well the candidate will communicate with you and how well the candidate will discuss about the problem, debate about the problem.
For sure.
Great. And of course, like the coding skills and the system design skills are also important during the interview.
Yeah.
But sometimes like it's like depending on the way the candidates will talk about the problem, this is also a huge plus.
Big time if they can grok it. Not every engineer will know the language they're coming in. Like I'm happy to interview any engineer, and if they want to take an attempt at a new language, fine, do it. And like, if they can explain it in another language that maybe we don't use, that's also good. So the language is just code is it's just different syntax for different languages. It's like understanding problems and communicating them. That's a bigger thing.
And like, I know that this is very specific for each company, but like what culture fit questions would you make to developers?
My one is I tend to look for engineers that bias to simplicity. So the kind of questions I would ask would be, I would ask how could you design Instagram.com for me? And if they start designing it for 1 million people straight away, or 100 million people, or 1 billion people straight away, they're not biasing to simplicity. Like the first question a good engineer would ask would be, so you're doing a clone of Instagram, how many people are going to use it? And I go, 10 people are going to use it. The design for something that's going to be used by 10 people is vastly different to this design that's going to be used for 1 million people. And knowing that, having that kind of bias to what is the minimum engineering to get us to a certain amount of people, that's what I would look for. But again, that's just me being very biased. That's how I think. Simpler systems tend to have, shorter cycle times in development. So I always just like, what's the maximum number of things you need or customers you need using a particular feature? It's 1 million. Cool. I'm designing for 1 million too, and we're leaving it at that. Mm-hmm. Because if I design it for 1 billion, I could, chew up 12 months of engineering time doing that.
Exactly. Like you save a lot of work, and you are more specific to the problem. Like you don't create something crazy that nobody will use. So simplicity. Yeah, simplicity is very powerful. Okay, great. And what was the toughest career challenge you had to face, and how did you overcome it?
It's going back to a previous question, which is, have you ever had to fire somebody? Being fired is also not fun.
Yeah.
So I've gone through that once. It's not great, not especially when it's not done well. And like that's why I have like empathy for people all the time now, which is like, you have a lot of things that run through your head. Where you go, why did I fail? Like, what did I do wrong? Why wasn't I good enough? That's what runs through someone's head, because that's what ran through my head. Honestly, I just wasn't a good fit for the company at the time. Me and the founder, it's very small companies. Problems are much bigger, as opposed to like, if you're in a 500-man engineering org and I don't get along with Rafa, they just go, Podge, just move to another team then, and the problem goes away. When you're in a 5-man startup, that can't be, like, you can't move you can move to the other end of the room. That's as far as it goes, So that was probably the toughest, and we don't talk about it in an industry, the amount of firings that tend to happen, which is the reason I give this as an answer. And I give it a lot more. I'm a lot more honest about these things these days. I'm not a bad engineer. I'm not a bad manager, I think. I have engineers who I've worked with before working with me again, so I kind of go, I must be doing something right. It's just, I just wasn't a fit for that particular human being. And there's a lot of people that I wouldn't be a fit for. And I'm actually okay with saying that too. And that's why I actively turn down positions, because I just look like, not about the purpose or the autonomy or the mastery part, because I look at you and go, would me and Rafa get along? Like, I'd have to sit next to you possibly 8 hours a day if we were in an office. Those days are gone. But, we would have to work with each other closely. Would I get along? It's like, yeah, we would. It'd be good. And you move forward. And that's the kind of conversations that goes through my head now. So I find I say no 9 times out of 10 though to companies now because of that though. So I get a lot more selective and a lot more picky and choosy. And I look for that, like, are you nice parts in the culture of a company? But that's just me. So yeah, doesn't get any tougher than getting fired. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. To be selective about where you're gonna work, because you're going to be spending a lot of time in the company, and if the other person does not connect with you very well, then it's going to be difficult. So I think that's even like very good advice for software engineers as well.
I hope
so. Selective.
I hope so. We'll see. Yeah. Time will tell.
Great. So what books do you recommend for software engineers to read, and can you just tell a little bit why they are good for them?
What I look into is more engineering books, not software engineering books, but engineering books itself, like actual engineering, because we are an engineering culture. I look at lean manufacturing a lot. So actual books. Drift into Failure is a book I like. Another one is A Field Guide to Understanding Human Error. Both are books about failures. And like, how do we look at failure, and like, how do we reason about failure? Like the Field Guide to Understanding Human Behavior is just, I think the premise is, I haven't read it in a while now, so my memory is going to be bad, but it's like, there's a common perception that there's a bad apple. There's one bad apple caused your problem in your company, and that's why you had a big outage. And the Field Guide to Human Understanding is like, it's not that. There is a million different things that go wrong that cause an outage. And, you often see it on the news. Oh, our website went down because a junior engineer released some bad code. And you're kind of going, really? Did they release bad code? Like, what? You've blamed the human for doing that. But at the same time, what allowed that human to release the code? Like what caused, let them to do that without any safety? So it's not about the human who released the code. It's what part of the system allowed them to release code. So that's what it looks at. Like there's a bigger thing to be doing around that. My kids are in the room now as well, so this will be fun the last few minutes. But yeah, so it's and another one then obviously is anything by Deming. He's big into what you call us, lean manufacturing. So she wants to say that. Hello. Give me 2 minutes. So big into like lean manufacturing, Toyota production system. The Toyota Way is a really good book. Drift into Failure, Figure Out the Understanding Human Error, both by Sidney Decker. Anything about Toyota. It's all about like systems and people also like usually recommend like The Goal, which is like theory of constraints, stuff like that. They're the kind of things that interest me. Is like, how do you make large systems work efficiently? And a software engineering group of engineers, multiple teams, is a system. So how do you optimize that system, and where are the bottlenecks? How do you move things on? It's not easy. Like the Toyota production system is incredibly hard to adopt. Many companies try to adopt it, thinking it's going to be like a silver bullet for them. And Toyota always go, probably not going to be. Like Ford tried to take it on. They have the Ford production system, and they tried it, and like they as well, just like it didn't work as well as Toyota did, because it's like in their culture to like build quality in. That's one of their key tenets. Like there's no adding quality on at the end where you do testing at the end, like a lot of teams do. It's quality is built in from the very start. Even when they start talking about building cars, they kind of go, how are we going to test the car? How are we going to ensure the car is of high quality? They're the conversations they have. They don't have them at the end. And their entire system is like designed and built around that. Mm-hmm. So any of those books, I'll give you the links afterwards. Again, not selling them. I don't make like an affiliate fee, but I think more engineers should read these type of books to make them better engineers. Coding is coding. It's fine, but like engineering is hard.
Great. Thanks for your answer. I'll also put the links, the book links here in the video. Great. Thanks so much for your time, Podge, and for this great conversation and the great insights for the Java Challengers audience. And I also know that you have an awesome product to help developers in their career. And like I'm sure that the Java Challengers audience, like they would like to hear about your product. So can you let us know what is your product about and how your product will help software developers?
So me and a couple of my friends, you know them. You've worked with all of them.
Yes.
It's me and Roberto, Eugene, and Luciano. We do this mentorship program, and depending on where you are in your career, if you're like a graduate and you're looking for that first job, it's not something we charge for. We do it for free. So you can go to hulacorn.com, and there's a section there on free mentorship. Where you can go in and you can just book a meeting with any one of us, and we'll go in and we'll talk to you for 30 minutes and we'll give you help. Yeah, it's totally free. You'll never be asked for money. We're not in it to help people getting into the industry. If you're in the industry, however, we also have a huge amount of experience in, like, as you see, we're talking about management there for a long time, but like Roberto and Luciana and Eugene. Eugene's the CTO. I'll do a plug for Luciana. Luciana's written like the best-selling book in Node.js design patterns. Amazing engineer. Roberto's worked in Google and Amazon. And I've been like in like Bank of America, Siemens as well, and been a manager for a long time. So we have a huge breadth of I think it's like 80 years experience between the four of us. So if you're an experienced engineer, we also have a section where you can buy like time with us as well, and you can do. We give you like resources on top of that, like articles, books, stuff like that, which will give you certain things that we've talked about here today, like how to build up resilience in the face of adversity. How to, communicate, how to manage stress. We have over 1,000 articles that we've curated for ourselves over the years that we provide as well. We charge for that. We only charge for that because if you have a full-time job as an engineer already, you can afford to pay for it. If you're a graduate, you get it for free. So that's the two pricing strategies. Beyond that, Hulacorn itself is that's a side of the side gig. Hulacorn itself is we're like trying to build a product in public. So we're trying to figure out, we're not looking to become like one of these billionaire like Patrick and John Collison and Stripe kind of things. We just would like to start a nice little small side business and build something that a customer wants, because it allows us to like exercise muscles we don't do in our day-to-day business and day-to-day jobs. So like, I'm an engineering manager. I work for a really good company and I like what I do, but I like to do marketing. I like to figure out marketing. I'm not going to get an opportunity to do that in the job. So we do it as on publicly as well on hulacorn.com. So any of those things sound interesting, come visit us and you can sign up to the newsletter, or you can book in a time with us and we'll have a chat.
Amazing. So you have a program where new engineers can just like book a meeting, a 30 minutes meeting with you and like have a free consultation. That's about their career. That's amazing, to get their first job, right?
To get their first job. Yeah, we help them. And like we use our network as well. If we have anyone that's hiring graduates, we'll introduce you to them. We do CV and resume reviews. We fix it up for you as well. We tell you what, like engineering managers like me look for in a resume, how we read them, how you optimize so you get the most attention on a resume, stuff like that. Yeah, we'll do all that for free, even out. And we give you, and I'd be dangerous to saying this to a large crowd, but like we try to give you unlimited time as well. So it's not just half an hour. You could book in 2 hours with us over a couple of weeks, and we'll do that too. Amazing. If you need it. Sometimes we do cut it short, saying this is not going to be productive for you. Like we can't help you. And we just cut it off, but that hasn't happened, touch wood, to date. But we do put it out as a disclaimer for sure.
Awesome. That's a very nice initiative. Congratulations on that.
So if any Java engineers want to come and have a chat with me, please do book in time. We have jobs here in Dublin all the time. I do get to say this in an official capacity. Can I read out the blurb I'm allowed to say about my current company? Would you be okay with that?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. I'm very careful never to mix my work with my personal work. But because I think I work for a really good company, I'm making these exceptions these days, and I just need to find it, because I did go to like the powers that be in my company kind of go, what is the official line that I can say? So this is the official line. I would say it's like toasttab.com. If you want to go look at careers, it's careers.toasttab.com. Is an all-in-one platform built for restaurants of all sizes. We provide a single platform of software as a service, product, and financial technology solutions that give restaurants everything they need to run their business. We are always looking for good engineers, so come join us if you like what you see. I would personally recommend them. Great company to work for at toasttab.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I also recommend Toast. It's a very nice company to work on. Awesome. So thanks a lot for the interview, Podge. Thanks a lot for your time, and I hope to have you again.
Yeah, totally. I'd love to come back. We'll see what you have to say.
Yeah, and I'll also put the link from the product you have, so that developers can reach out to you. Developers who want their first job, and also developers who are more experienced and they want to have access to Pod's content. I saw the content and it's really amazing. Like I saw, like they built a really robust structure on their website, and like you're gonna grow a lot with all the content they gather. It's a lot of very valuable content.
Cool. I hope it is. All right, Rafa. Great talking to you. Great catching up. Great to see your face again, all right?
Yeah, great to see your face as well, Podge. Thank you so much.
Ciao.